For decades, country music fans have whispered the same question. Were Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn truly friends or fierce rivals? They smiled on camera. They praised each other in interviews. Yet, behind the rhinestones and the charm, the two biggest female voices in country music were often chasing the same spotlight, the same awards, and the same place in history. It was a competition that seemed too perfect for the media to ignore and too personal for the women to fully deny. Now, at 78, Dolly Parton has finally confirmed the rumors, not to stir up trouble, not to rewrite history, but to tell the truth about what really happened between her and Loretta Lynn, and why it still matters today. In the world of country music, timing can be everything. And in the late 1960s and early 1970s, two women were climbing the same mountain at the same time, Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn. Both had come from humble beginnings, both wrote songs that told the truth about women's lives, and both had a voice you could recognize in a single note. Yet their paths, though different in style and personality, were destined to intersect. Loretta Lynn had already carved out a place for herself in Nashville. Born in Butcher Hollow, Kentucky, she was a coal miner's daughter who sang with a raw honesty that resonated far beyond the country charts. By the time Dolly arrived in the city in 1964, Loretta had a string of hits and the respect of the industry. She was tough, outspoken, and unafraid to challenge the rules, especially when it came to what a woman could say in a song. Dolly's entry into country music felt like a burst of color. She was younger, bubbly, and instantly captivating. Her songwriting had a way of mixing wit and wisdom, heartbreak and humor, all wrapped in melodies that lingered long after the record stopped spinning. Nashville quickly took notice. With her breakout hit Dumb Blonde in 1967, Dolly proved she wasn't just a pretty face or a clever lyricist. She was a force. But when two women with that much talent rise side by side, comparisons are inevitable. Radio programmers debated which one connected better with their audience. Award voters weighed whether Loretta's grit or Dolly's polish represented the future of the genre. Even fans began taking sides, sometimes without either woman saying a word. For Dolly, Loretta represented a certain kind of authenticity, a truth-teller who had kicked down doors for women in country music. But that admiration didn't erase the fact that they were often nominated in the same categories, booked for the same television specials, and sometimes competing for the same hit song. The country music scene, for all its warmth and community, could still be a small pond. And in a small pond, even the brightest stars can cast shadows over each other. By the early 1970s, the press had already begun framing their relationship as a rivalry. It wasn't that Dolly and Loretta were at odds every day, but every time one of them won a major award, there were whispers about how the other might have felt. Each chart-topping single, each sold-out tour date, seemed to feed the narrative that there could only be one reigning queen of country music at a time. And yet, on the surface, both women seemed to brush it off. They posed for photographs together, they praised each other in interviews. But behind the scenes, the unspoken competition lingered. It was part of the air they breathed in Nashville. The knowledge that every song, every performance, could tip the balance in ways neither of them could fully control. Still, this wasn't just a story about two women caught in a rivalry. It was about how the country music industry and the media thrived on the drama of pitting them against each other. For some in Nashville, the question wasn't whether Dolly and Loretta were rivals, it was how to make the rivalry sell. By 1971, the country music scene had found its two leading ladies. Loretta Lynn, already a household name, was releasing songs that pushed boundaries. Coal miner's daughter had cemented her as a storyteller whose roots ran deep. Dolly Parton, fresh from her breakout years on the Porter Wagoner Show, was stepping into her own as a solo artist. Their names appeared side by side on award ballots, tour posters, and in the gossip pages of Nashville's trade magazines. It was here that the first whispers began to take shape. Fans noticed when a radio station played Dolly's latest single right after one of Loretta's, and sometimes skipped Loretta's altogether when Dolly had a new release. Industry insiders speculated about whether the two women were privately keeping score. At award shows, cameras lingered on their reactions when the other's name was called. The Country Music Association Awards became one of the most visible stages for this brewing tension. When Loretta won Female Vocalist of the Year in 1972, some papers ran headlines suggesting Dolly's fans felt she had been robbed. When Dolly won the same award the following year, others framed it as passing the crown. The reality was far less dramatic than the headlines, but in a town like Nashville, perception can quickly become its own truth. It didn't help that the two women were stylistically distinct in ways that invited comparison. Loretta's image was rooted in her Appalachian upbringing. Her songs carried the grit of real-life struggles, often touching on marital strife, motherhood, and working-class pride. Dolly, on the other hand, embraced a glamorous, almost theatrical style. Her larger-than-life hair, sparkling stage outfits, and quick-witted humor made her as much a visual presence as a vocal one. Music journalists, many of them male, played up these differences as if they were irreconcilable. Articles framed Loretta as the no-nonsense pioneer and Dolly as the charming upstart. Some stories even implied that there wasn't room for two women at the top, that one would inevitably win the decade. And with each feature, the idea of a rivalry became less of a rumor and more of an accepted fact. The speculation spilled into the songwriting world as well. When Dolly released Jolene in 1973, a song about a woman stealing another's man, some columnists couldn't resist connecting it to Loretta's own history of writing about infidelity. Was Dolly answering Loretta in song? Was it a subtle jab? The truth was more complicated, but rumors rarely wait for facts. Behind the scenes, there were small moments that fed the fire. One story, making the rounds, claimed that Dolly turned down an offer to record a duet with Loretta because of scheduling conflicts. Another suggested Loretta had been upset when Dolly secured a primetime television slot that she herself had been pursuing. Whether true or not, these tales grew in the telling, passed along in green rooms, radio stations, and label offices until they became part of Nashville folklore. And yet, the two women rarely addressed the talk head-on. Loretta, when asked about Dolly, often deflected with a compliment. Dolly, in her way, did the same. But silence can be read in many ways, and for those who wanted a rivalry, the lack of outright denial was all they needed. The stage was set. Two women, both at the height of their powers, both beloved and envied, both unwilling to step aside. The country music industry had its narrative, and fans had their drama. All that was missing was a moment when the private tension might spill into public view. In the glittering world of country music, the public saw Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn as gracious, smiling queens of the stage. But backstage, the air wasn't always as warm as the spotlight suggested. While neither woman was openly hostile, there were moments subtle, fleeting, but telling, when the rivalry the press loved to write about slipped into real life. It often happened in the quiet spaces of award season. Dressing rooms just down the hall from each other, wardrobe teams rushing in and out, publicists whispering about who had more camera time or better placement in the running order. A last-minute change to a televised lineup might move Dolly's performance after Loretta's a decision some interpreted as a deliberate choice to have one upstage the other. Those who worked closely with them saw the competition in small gestures. Dolly's camp would push for prime slots on the Grand Ole Opry schedule, knowing Loretta's team was aiming for the same dates. Loretta's manager might hold back on confirming a festival appearance until he knew whether Dolly had already signed on. These moves weren't personal insults so much as survival in an industry where timing and visibility could make or break a record. There were even occasions when industry politics put them in direct conflict. One producer recalled inviting both women to participate in a star-studded charity album. According to those in the room, neither wanted to follow the other's recording session. Dolly reportedly felt that going second might make her song feel like an afterthought. Loretta believed going second meant she could be compared unfavorably to Dolly's polished delivery. In the end, the producer scheduled them on separate days, a small but telling compromise. Television appearances carried their own undercurrent of tension. On variety shows, the producers sometimes played into the dueling divas image, pairing them in medleys where their contrasting voices highlighted the differences in their styles. Both women were consummate professionals, but beneath the harmonies there was an undeniable edge. Neither wanted to be the one who faded into the background. In private conversations with trusted friends, there were hints of how the rivalry was felt. Loretta was known to bristle when interviewers asked how it felt to be compared to Dolly, as if her career needed to be measured against anyone else's. Dolly, meanwhile, occasionally hinted that the constant pairing in the press was a mixed blessing. It kept her name in headlines, but it also tethered her to a narrative she hadn't chosen. Still, both women understood the business reality. A rivalry could sell records. Concert promoters leaned into it, sometimes advertising festivals as if they were contests. Country music magazines teased readers with cover lines that suggested a feud, then delivered soft-pedaled features that kept the rumors alive without confirming them outright. The public may have thought they were seeing pure competition, but behind it was a carefully managed balance, a willingness to let the idea of a rivalry breathe, without letting it boil over into real damage. Yet, even with the careful handling, moments of strain slipped through. A missed congratulatory handshake after an award, an absence from the other's big career celebration. Industry insiders noticed these things, even if the average fan didn't dictate. Each small omission became another brick in the wall of the story people thought they knew. By the late 1970s, Dolly and Loretta were icons, and the so-called rivalry had become part of their legacy, whether they wanted it or not. But it would be decades before one of them would finally speak plainly about what it all meant. And when that moment came, it would come from Dolly herself. When Dolly Parton finally addressed the decades-old rumors, it wasn't on a stage, and it wasn't part of a flashy television special. It happened in a quieter setting, during a conversation where the question of Loretta Lynn came up unexpectedly. For years, she had sidestepped it with charm, offering praise for Loretta's talent and trailblazing spirit. But now, at 78, she didn't look away from the heart of it. She acknowledged what fans and industry insiders had suspected all along: there had been a rivalry. Not the kind that turned into shouting matches or public feuds, but the kind that was felt in every chart race, every award season, and every glance at the industry's headlines. "We were both trying to be the best," she explained, making it clear that the competition was real and that it pushed her to work harder. It wasn't bitterness that Dolly described. It was something sharper and more complex. The knowledge that, in an era when women were still fighting for equal billing in country music, there was only so much space at the top. And if one woman was there, it meant the other had to fight harder to be seen. That pressure could bring out ambition, but it could also bring out moments of quiet tension neither of them cared to admit at the time. Dolly spoke about how they watched each other's moves. If Loretta released a bold, provocative song, Dolly would think about how to match its impact in her own way. If Dolly landed a high-profile television spot, Loretta would inevitably follow with a major appearance of her own. It was a dance, sometimes graceful, sometimes pointed, that lasted for years. Yet, in the same breath, Dolly refused to let the story be reduced to bitterness. She credited Loretta with inspiring her to aim higher. She said the rivalry wasn't a wall between them, but a mirror, one that reflected what was possible for a woman in their business. It was competition, yes, but it was also a shared fight against an industry that often underestimated them. When she finally used the word rivals, it was without apology. She didn't try to erase the past or soften it beyond recognition. She simply framed it as part of their truth. Two women, both at the height of their powers, navigating a world that sometimes forced them into the same ring. And for all the moments of strain, Dolly made it clear that she carried no resentment. If anything, she believed the rivalry kept them sharp, kept them relevant, and reminded them both of what they could accomplish. For fans, it was a rare moment of candor. After decades of smiles, shared stages, and sidestepped questions, Dolly Parton had finally confirmed what the whispers had long claimed. Yes, there was rivalry, but it wasn't a wound that lingered. It was part of what made their parallel careers unforgettable. And yet, as open as she was, Dolly left one thing unspoken: whether Loretta had felt exactly the same way. That question, perhaps, would remain unanswered, giving the rivalry one last piece of mystery to carry forward. By the time Dolly Parton spoke openly about the rivalry, Loretta Lynn had already passed into legend. Her death in 2022 closed a chapter in country music history, yet the conversation about her life and her connection to Dolly only grew louder. For many fans, the acknowledgement of competition didn't tarnish their memories. If anything, it made the story richer, more human. The truth was, their parallel rise had changed the possibilities for women in Nashville. Before Loretta and Dolly, the country charts were largely dominated by men. Female artists were often treated as a novelty expected to charm, not challenge. But here were two women who didn't just compete with the men. They competed with each other, breaking sales records and winning awards in an industry that rarely crowned more than one queen at a time. The rivalry, as Dolly framed it, wasn't about jealousy in its purest sense. It was about pride. Pride in their own work, and pride in showing the world that women's stories could sell just as strongly as any honky-tonk anthem sung by a man. And while they never traded public barbs, the tension between them gave their careers an urgency that fans could feel. For the industry, this dynamic was gold. Promoters could bill concerts as once-in-a-lifetime opportunities to see two country legends share the stage. Awards shows could frame every win as a passing of the crown. Magazines could sell copies with speculative cover lines about Dolly versus Loretta, who rules Nashville. Even decades later, retrospectives often placed them side by side, inviting the same comparisons that had fueled gossip in the 1970s. Yet with time, something shifted. The public rivalry softened into mutual respect, at least in the way it was remembered. Dolly's eventual words reframed the competition as a kind of shared burden and shared achievement. She made it clear that the rivalry never erased the respect she had for Loretta's groundbreaking work, and that without each other, their careers might have followed very different paths. Their legacies, inevitably, became intertwined. Loretta's courage to sing about taboo subjects, birth control, cheating, women's independence, opened doors for Dolly to experiment with her own narratives, blending humor, heartbreak, and unapologetic self-expression. Dolly's success in television, film, and crossover hits proved that a country woman could conquer multiple industries, inspiring Loretta to push her own career beyond traditional expectations. For women in country music today, the Dolly Loretta story stands as a reminder that competition can coexist with admiration. Rivalry doesn't always mean hostility. Sometimes it means refusing to settle for second place, even when the person in first is someone you respect deeply. It's a complicated truth, but a necessary one, especially in an industry where women still fight for equal space on radio playlists and award ballots. And so, the image endures. Two women in glittering gowns, standing just far enough apart on stage to mark their independence, but close enough to sing the same harmony. They were rivals, yes, but they were also trailblazers who understood, perhaps better than anyone else, the cost and the reward of sharing the summit. In the end, Dolly Parton's words didn't rewrite the history books, they simply gave shape to what so many had suspected. The rivalry between her and Loretta Lynn was real, but it was never a feud that poisoned the well. It was a current that ran beneath the surface, shaping their choices, sharpening their focus, and pushing them to heights neither might have reached alone. For decades, fans saw them as two sides of the same coin. Loretta, with her fearless truth-telling, Dolly, with her boundless charm and ambition. Together, they redefined what a woman could be in country music. They proved there was more than one way to be strong, more than one way to tell a story, more than one way to wear a crown. When Dolly finally confirmed the rumors, she didn't open an old wound. She offered a rare moment of honesty that allowed fans to see both women more fully, not as flawless icons, but as human beings navigating the demands of fame, art, and identity. The competition didn't diminish them, it elevated them. And maybe that's the truest legacy of all. That two women could share the same spotlight, challenge each other, and still stand as legends in their own right. That rivalry, in its own way, can be a form of respect. And that the bond between Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn, complicated though it was, belongs among the great stories of music history. For more emotional stories, check out this video.